Welcome to meeting number 12 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 19, 2020, the committee is resuming its study of the implementation of Mi'kmaq Treaty fishing rights to support a moderate livelihood. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of September 23, 2020. The public portion of the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules once again to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in the committee room. Keep in mind the directives of the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. I don't think we have anyone in the room today. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. Before I go to our witnesses, I'd now like to call upon Nancy to update on some issues we may be facing this evening.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
Thank you so much, Chair. The Chair asked me to advise you that further to the meeting, Monday's meeting, I wanted to give you some details about what has been happening and what has been done. So, to follow up with you, the witnesses who were with us on a Monday and for whom it was difficult to have interpretation because of technical difficulties, they've all been re-invited. They are the same. And they confirmed today that the tests were done with the team, and I can perhaps read this directly to you. I'm told that the tests went very well indeed, and they are sure that both the sound, the connection, and the equipment were verified with the witnesses, so that that would allow the witnesses to be able to appear and understand Zoom. To date, everything is functioning. This being said, of course, technology being what it is, I do know that when you were voting, we did have a few minor difficulties with the sound. So we always do a sound check. But should it happen during the meeting that there would be difficulties arising, it would be totally outside of our control. Now, with respect to the in-camera meeting that was to be held after this meeting, I will send you an email with the password, because it will be a different password for the in-camera section, a different meeting. And there is another note that will be attached to you. So I think, Chair, that this is probably everything I had to say. I don't know if you have any questions or comments. If you do, let me know.
Oh, no problem, Nancy. Thanks for that. I'd like to, of course, for the witness, welcome back Michael Dadswell, retired professor of biology. Mr. Hutchins is back with us again, retired detachment supervisor for Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And of course, Melanie Sonneberg is back with us again as president of the Canadian Independent Fish Harvesters Federation. I know we did hear their testimony already, so they won't be giving more testimony or repeating it again this evening. We have one new witness this afternoon, of course. We couldn't get the right connection the other day to get him on, is Mr. Sterling Beliveau, retired fisherman and, of course, former Minister of Fisheries of Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Beliveau, we will start off with you giving a 5-minute or less opening remarks, please. You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
So I'm good to go here now.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Fisheries Standing Committee. I would like to present my perspective of the lobster dispute that is ongoing within our province and soon to be Atlantic Canada wide. My involvement has been since the initial Marshall decision in 1999, where, with my colleagues, we arrived at the first interim agreement between non-Aboriginals and Aboriginals. Both parties agreed upon this agreement for the first few years, same seasons, same rules, and training. After the first few years, the commercial industry was not invited to the discussion table. This is where the breakdown started. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. The gap has increased from then to present day. Fast forward to 2020, with the commercial lobster industry not at the table, we have witnessed the evolution of DFO allowing the license of commercial lobster licenses by Aboriginal chiefs. The chiefs, in turn, have control of the distribution of these or them to Aboriginal fishermen, but instead are leasing them to non-Aboriginals. These licenses have been paid for by the Canadian taxpayers. This is why I have called for an audit of licenses issued to bands, native bands from 1999 to 2020 to determine who is receiving the benefits from these licenses. The licenses are being leased out not in the spirit of the Supreme Court Marshall decision or the present day owner-operator policies, which is being enforced by DFO on the commercial inshore lobster industry. Our present Minister of DFO, Honorable Bernadette Jordan, has created this mess. She is responsible for creating this policy of segregation and a two-tier system of managing our Atlantic inshore lobster fisheries. We heard her announce that there would be no, I repeat, no commercial season outside of the existing lobster seasons. After 2 years of investigation, she actually prosecuted the illegal sale of lobsters in St. Mary's Bay with the use of microchips hidden in lobsters. In addition to the CBC story posted October 5th, 2018, the province revoked the company's buying and processing license. This past 2 weeks, she has allowed Chief Mike Sack to establish a moderate livelihood in St. Mary's Bay, which is clearly in violation of the Supreme Court of Canada's Marshall II. Also, the clarification from the Fisheries Standing Committee dated 1999, which states that conservation comes first. The minister has authority to regulate, and the Aboriginals have access to the fishery, but must comply with adjacency to their band's territory. Mr. Sack has jumped over 2 bands and fishing illegal in St. Mary's Bay. He has taken over Small Crafton Harbour's wharf and has a Nova Scotia Supreme Court injunction protecting him to participate in illegal fishery. Small Crafton Harbour's membership has taken a leave of absence to further confuse the situation. Honorable Jordan this month is enforcing and seizing of illegal lobster traps in Cape Breton and again in St. Mary's Bay, a double standard with segregation for Southwest Nova. Clearwater Seafoods Limited has a monopoly on the offshore lobster licenses and are in the final stages of an agreement of selling 2 of these licenses to the Aboriginal bands. This sale needs to be put on hold until the inshore commercial lobster industry is at the negotiating table. This is all interconnected because the band chief is going to lease these licenses back to Clearwater. I am suggesting a 1-year pause to any activity outside the commercial set seasons for the inshore lobster fishing so that both sides can come together to the table to find a peaceful path forward. Our forefathers created these seasons for reasons. I like to caution both sides segregation of setting fishing interests apart and building a two-tier system will be chaotic. Putting 150 years of regulations and conservations is now put in jeopardy. Mr. Chair, I just want to conclude my opening remarks by saying that I met with Mr. Alistair Surratt last week and requested through him that the commercial lobster industry must have a panel or a mechanism to have their voices heard, for we are part of this nation called Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beliveau. Just a little bit over your time, but I wanted to make sure you finished your statement where you were so close there to the end. Now we'll go to questions from committee members. I will say that we actually started the committee meeting a couple of nights ago and ran into problems, of course, but I did reach out to the vice chairs and it was an agreement among us that we would start off where we ended on Monday night with regards to the order of questioning. So we all agreed, and I'll go now to Madam Gill for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I also want to thank our witnesses today. I do have a question for Mr. Dadswell. Given his experience as a biologist, I'd like to ask him what are the factors that he could explain to us that have an important effect on the reproduction of lobster and how the viability of the stocks can be affected if there isn't a constant season.
Ms. Gill, the reproduction of lobsters is pretty much dependent on what happens to the females. The females are quite sensitive to factors in the environment, and they're also slower growing and reproduce less often than most other species. Female lobsters only reproduce every second year. And the other problem is that when they reproduce, they have to attach the eggs to the abdomen, and that means that the size of the abdomen is important in how many eggs they produce. So here you have a female organism that is in a population that can only reproduce every second year, and for most of the lobsters in the fishery, the first 10 years or so that they're there, can only produce between 8,000 and 32,000 eggs. Now, when you compare that to something like a cod can put out 1 million eggs, a mature female, and or a scallop, a sea scallop, they can produce up to 10 million eggs, and they both do it annually rather than every second year. So females are fragile in terms of their recruitment potential, and they should be carefully protected.
Merci.
Thank you. My question really had two dimensions. You answered the first part with respect to the fragility of the species, but I want to know if the absence of clear regulation could affect, and of course this depends on the areas, on the medium or long term, the very stock of that we have of lobsters.
Yes, that's the whole reason why seasons were created in the first place. There's differing oceanographic situations in say, the Gulf of St. Lawrence and in southwest Nova Scotia, St. Mary's Bay. They drive the life history of the lobster in each of those places. So in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, where you have a very warm summer, the lobsters go into soft shell stage earlier. And then that's when they can join with the males to collect sperm. They then carry the sperm for up to a couple of months or so, and so that happens in the Gulf by early August, say. Whereas in the area of St. Mary's Bay, they don't go into the soft shell until sometime in late July or early August because of the colder temperatures. They then do not extrude their eggs until October, November. And so during that period, when you take a female that will potentially extrude her eggs, it's the same thing as taking a buried female that's protected. And you really can't tell whether they're, carrying sperm or whether they're going to extrude eggs. So it's critical that the seasons are adhered to in order to conserve the lobster stocks. Is that enough? Yeah. Did I answer your?
C'est vous qui en...
You're the one to decide if that's enough. You're the one answering. Thank you very much, sir. I also have a question for Mr. Beliveau. Earlier, he spoke to us about chaos. That was his term. That's a very strong term. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what solutions he'd like to see brought to this problem, because the fishers have to, of course, be heard. Particularly, all parties have to be heard. It's on a nation-to-nation basis, of course, but the fishers from the indigenous nations also have to be heard.
Yes, I hope are you hearing me now? Yes, okay. I appreciate the question. The chaos is what I'm referring to. And if you look over the last 2 months, you'll see the chaos that I'm referring to is that the commercial sector is feeling that they have been abandoned by the present system. And I can go into great lengths here, but you have to have, and I referred to in my open remarks, that there needs to be a mechanism, a panel, or some form, whatever you want to call it, that the inshore, the commercial sector, has the voice and is being heard by the minister. And apparently right now, if you go, there's a very strong theme throughout the commercial sector that their voices is not being heard. So we need to have this mechanism so we have an opportunity to bring their concerns forward. And what's the frustrating point is I can get into it, is that Mr. Sack is basically not in his jurisdiction. And I can't point this out clear enough. And if you have access to a map, you'll see, if we can get back to the Marshall decision, it talked about adjacency to the band's territory. And if you look at the Nova Scotia map, you will see that Mr. Sack has jumped over 2 territories, Bear River and Acadia. And that's a 2.5-hour drive by car, if not 3 hours. It's a 2 days journey by vessel, by a lobster boat, to get to that particular area.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beliveau. Thank you, Mr. Beliveau. We're going way over time. Hopefully, you'll get your point across by some other questioning. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses first for coming back, and also to you, Mr. Chair, for suspending the meeting to ensure that everybody's language is in place and translations there for all members in this committee. This is a question, Mr. Dadswell. We had Robert Stanwyck at the University of Maine. He told this committee that there is no concern for overfishing or damages from fishing outside the season in regards to what's taking place with the Sabaganagati. And in Maine, they fish year long, he cited, and have a much higher fishing rate, but stocks remain stable. What data is this committee missing if both DFO and, Professor Stanwyck and Maine say that the stocks are healthy? Maybe you can help us better understand the differences there.
Well, you have to realize that Maine is a little bit of a special case. What happens in lobster biology is there what are called recruitment cells. And the recruitment cells are the current systems that run along the coastline. So in the Maine area, the recruitment cell is what I call the Western Fundy cell, the Western Bay of Fundy cell, and it runs from way up at the head of the Bay of Fundy all the way down into Maine. And what happens is that Maine lobsters, you might not believe this, they migrate all the way from Massachusetts and Maine, all the way up into the inner Bay of Fundy to release their eggs. And then those eggs and those larvae drift downstream. So what happens is that Maine, more or less, gets the advantage of all the Canadian lobsters as well, releasing their eggs in that area. and they get a huge amount of larvae arriving in Maine. And that's one of the things that's allowed their fishery to remain stable and highly productive. The other thing is that the Mainers have been at it a longer time with fishermen involvement in the management of the fishery. And what they do in Maine is they notch every female that they catch that is buried, that is carrying eggs. And this started back in the 1970s. So now we've had 50 years of notching, and a huge number of females in the Maine population are now protected by that notching characteristic. Now, we can do that in Canada, but it's going to take some time.
I really appreciate your feedback, and I would have loved to ask you more questions because I'm sure we could have a whole panel just on that. Ms. Sonnenberg, we've heard during this committee several times that there's, obviously existing barriers for First Nations fishers to enter the existing labor market in the Atlantic market. Can you speak about what you believe some of those barriers are, and what efforts do you think the federal government can make to help with these barriers to existing commercial harvesters?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Johns. I think it would be inappropriate for me to, speculate on what those barriers are. We certainly have many member organizations in the Federation that work locally with different First Nations communities, and they would be more in a position, in their own backyards to talk about that. So I don't feel comfortable trying to speculate on what that might be. I do know that there is interest from our membership to continue some of the good work that's been done on the ground to help, over the last 21 years. For example, on the East Coast, many of our members have talked with the groups, and we have helped to integrate in some of the marshal access. But at this point in time, as I said, I wouldn't care to speculate on what some of those barriers are. I think that would be for those communities to do that.
Okay. You cited it, we've heard in this committee actually that many harvest leaders, are dealing with, the pressures from their members to respond to rumors. And obviously there's an aggressive posturing that's been happening, especially on social media at the docks. It's apparent that much of the problem is one of communication from the federal government. We've heard that today from several other witnesses, obviously with First Nations and from fisheries organizations. Can you talk about what efforts you think DFO and the federal government should take to improve communication channels on the ground, and also maybe what responsibilities do organizations like yours have in improving communications and supports and that you need from us? And I think about West Coast Aquatic on the West Coast, which I'm sure you're very well aware of, where they've got that management board where they had all fishers at the table and they were talking about management issues, working collectively, and then the government slowly started pulling money out of the board, which would have been a great model from coast to coast to coast. And what do you see moving forward that would help everybody?
I think Mr. Beliveau he didn't allude to it, he said it. We need a table. We need to come to that table collectively and work through this instead of doing it through the press where, we have a light shining, and you talked about aggressive behavior. I think that aggressive behavior is from a very concentrated reaction to a situation, but overall the reactions have been very low key. I think that people are to be commended on all sides of this discussion for maintaining cool heads. Generally, I think the aggression is it's a small pocket, but I think coming to a table and having DFO facilitate that. Maybe we step outside of DFO and do it ourselves. But certainly coming to a table where all parties can talk respectfully and put concerns on the table to try to work through, I think that is a good start with a very few things on the agenda that can be, worked through and then see how we do. But dividing us up through different tables is not working. That's clear to everybody, I think, from all sides. So I think for us, a start is let's get a table together where we have cooler heads, can sit down and discuss the issues of the day and try to work through them together.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go for 5 minutes to Mr. Arnold, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming back today. Through the course of this study something has become apparent to me that, and I believe all Canadians would agree that the government owes a duty to the public, and that's Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to explain and be transparent with the steps that have been taken, whether they were successful or not, at accommodating what was set out in the Marshall decision, Marshall 1 and Marshall 2. We've heard about the transfer of licenses from the buy-up of existing commercial licenses, transferring over to Indigenous fisheries. And I don't think the public or the Indigenous people are very clear on what was actually attempted or attained through that. Mr. Beliveau, would you be able to comment on that? And then I'd like to, if you can keep it fairly short, I'd like to hear from Mr. Hutchins as well.
You're
You
muted.
hearing me?
Yes.
Hear me? Okay. Okay. So I'll keep it short. First of all, in the first 5 years of the Marshall decision, the federal government spent over $600 million in acquiring licenses, in purchasing licenses from retirees. And just this last summer, they gave out to the native bands in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia an additional 322 more licenses. And the question I raised in my opening remarks, Mr. Arnold, was that these licenses now are being leased out, or a portion of them, and not in the hands of the Mi'kmaq people. And to me, this all Canadians must see this for what it's worth. It's not in the spirit of the Marshall decision, and it's not in the spirit of the owner-operator policy on the Atlantic East Coast. And we need this mechanism. And we both witnesses here in the last few minutes referred to a table or a mechanism. And these issues need to be brought out. And I want to ensure that the Mi'kmaq has access. And we need to do it in the spirit of the Marshall decision. And if we can create this mechanism or table and abide by the adjacency rule, we can easily solve this if we have level-headed people in a position of authority giving advice to the minister. And we just need to make this happen.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins, would you care to comment on that?
Yes, I believe what Mr. Beliveau has said is correct, and so I won't repeat any of that. But in my experience as a law enforcement officer for the last 32 years, we have met many obstacles when it comes to enforcing the FSC fishery in St. Mary's Bay. There is a belief that that this is a rights-based fishery, and it's not. There is no treaty right associated with the harvesting of lobsters. So this is a policy that DFO created to give access to the Mi'kmaq people to access the lobster fishery. In doing so, the DFO failed miserably by providing officers with the resources to start an enforcement plan and to keep the fishery in check. This fishery, because it was not a rights-based fishery, had quotas assigned to each band. My goal was to enforce those quotas. That never happened. We were not allowed to enforce them. That caused major issues with the Indigenous fishers, because when we went to check them, they told us we had no right because their chiefs told them that they were allowed to do this. So there's a lot of miscommunication there. There's an absolute total, miscommunication between the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and its own people. And I experienced that for years, and it was very frustrating. And it's one of the reasons I left, because I could not do my job effectively anymore. I just want to talk about St. Mary's Bay really quickly, if I can. At the end of the lobster season, every May, there's a huge number of lobsters move into that shallow, warm bay. At any given time in the summer, you can get as many as 50 lobsters in a trap. Those lobsters are loaded with eggs, and they're soft, and they die, they smother, and they cannibalize each other. Imagine 50 lobsters in a trap. So what happens is when they land those lobsters, they're dead, a lot of them. When they sell them to the buyers, they die shortly after that. We did an investigation where we found thousands of pounds of discarded lobsters in the woods near Weymouth, Nova Scotia. It's either the buyers or the Indigenous fishers dumping those. That is a blatant disregard for the stock, and that's unacceptable. The problem is that we cannot sit down and have a conversation with Sipanakitik because they are the only band in the area that I couldn't develop a relationship with, and they never wanted to talk to me. And that was very unfortunate because we did many things to open that dialogue and to start a friendship, a meaningful friendship. And those were very disappointing times for me. And right now, there is a 50% decrease in the amount of lobsters from one year to the other that the commercial fishermen are catching. That's huge.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. We'll now go to Mr. Batiste for 5 minutes or less, please.
Yes, my question is for Dr. Dadswell. We've heard testimony from a PhD candidate, Shelley Denny, and was consistent with what Dr. Megan Bailey had said, a Canada Research Chair. And they suggested that the seasons for a reason argument is just as much about economics as it is about conservation. They both have suggested that what we're really talking is preserving the molting season because there is a better market for hard shell lobsters, not soft shell lobsters. Rather than the health and the viability of the stocks. How would you respond to the inconsistency within what you're telling us compared to what those learned doctors are told us at committee? I'm not hearing anything. Is he on mute?
I don't see him, Mr. Chair.
No, I don't. Yeah, he's got his video off.
Okay.
Strange things are happening. Good old computers.
Did you hear my question?
No.
Mr. Chair, can I get my time back? Ask again?
Ask again. I may give a little bit of leeway on the end, but your time is your time. If a witness is not ready to answer a question, I can't be responsible for that.
We heard testimony from PhD candidate Shelley Denny that was consistent with the report from Dr. Megan Bailey, a Canada Research Chair, that suggested that the seasons for a reason is not just about conservation, but about economic concerns as well. They both suggested that what we're really talking about is preserving the molting season because there is a better market for hard shell lobster, not soft shell lobster, rather than the health and viability of the stocks. And I'm wondering how you would respond to those doctors.
Well, basically, is that two considerations went into the original season choices. One was the biology of the lobsters in order to keep as many females protected as possible that were going to be carrying eggs and to protect soft shell lobsters. The second was the timing in relation to, you don't want all the lobsters from all the maritimes entering the market at once. So they've spaced it out so that you could get a smooth flow of lobsters into the system. And then also the oceanography is different. You can fish in the Gulf in the summer, but you can't fish in the winter because it's ice covered. Whereas down in Southwest Nova, you can fish in the winter. So these were the considerations that went into the system. And, they make sense. Totally. So,
but you would agree that it's not just about conservation, it's also about markets and economic principles as well, correct?
Probably 75-25. Okay. I mean, it's more important to preserve those females and look after them, really, than it is the marketing. And the other problem is soft shell lobsters. I mean, number one, they don't taste that good. Number two, they get killed very easily in the traps with other lobsters because they can kill them and eat them. And number three, they don't handle well. So you've got a problem both with soft shells and with females.
Okay, my next question is to Ms. Sonnenberg. So the 1999 Marshall decision didn't create a right. It recognized that a right had existed all along that the Mi'kmaq were deprived of based on the historical evidence from Wiccan, Dr. Bill Wiccan, at about 1778. Based on that, what do you think would be reconciliation or justice around providing Mi'kmaq access to a fisheries that they rightfully had a part of, but were denied that access for centuries?
That's the big question, Mr. Batiste. I think that we have seen some efforts to satisfy the Marshall decision as we received it in 1999. I was a young fisheries rep at the time when it came, and certainly what happened following that started that process. I think there are other things, and I think the concern in the industry is that we do help satisfy the right, but that we make sure that it isn't just the fishery that bears the burden of changing the landscape about how things happen in our coastal communities. And I think that's a huge talking point for all of us, is that we don't go down a road that upends everybody. And so to satisfy it, I think that's a conversation for that table for all of us to talk about, and to make sure that the government of Canada can fulfill that need, and that we're part of that process, and we do it in a way that's constructive.
So just in terms of the last question here, so if the Mi'kmaq were to say fish within the same season as everyone else, which is not what their rights say under Donald Marshall Jr., if they were to make that compromise, what would the fisheries associations be willing to do to involve them in the fisheries so that Mi'kmaq communities weren't filled with poverty?
In all fairness, Mr. Batiste, I think in the first round of Marshall with the access, we did step up. And after the dust settled and people came to grips with the rights and what that meant, I mean, it was all new to everybody on the fishing industry side. I think that we have an opportunity to work together, and we've done that. And these flare-ups that we see have been few and far between since 1999, when the initial announcement came out in September in 1999. I would go.
Just one last question. In just in interrupting.
Sorry, Mr. Batiste, I've given you a lot. I've given you a wide. I've given you a lot of leeway there, sir. So we're going to have to move on.
All right. I said I'd be nice. I will.
I'm being extra nice. I will now go to Madam Gill for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I might ask Mr. Béliveau to continue his answer earlier, the mechanism that he was talking about. But at the same time, in a future filled with hope, do you think that it's possible to actually achieve a forum or a mechanism? I think it would be interesting for everyone if we could bring all the parties together at one table.
Thank you very much, Madam Gill, for your question, and you're getting right to the core of the issue. And certainly, I believe the mechanism is our hope, our early Christmas present. If we could, hopefully, a recommendation will come from the Standing Committee to the Minister to create such a mechanism. And I want to point back to in my opening remarks, I pointed to the initial interim agreement, and where we found an agreement between both parties, and we created a way in for the Mi'kmaq back in 1999. And there was a balance. There was a balance of effort coming in with new licenses for the Mi'kmaq spread out in 34 in Southwest Nova Scotia. And right now we see this chaos that I referred to, is that we're seeing communities like Sauniaville and Matagan being ground zero or the lightning rod for the ministers and the Mi'kmaq's transition for moderate livelihood. We have to have a mechanism, a table where level-headed people can resolve this. Put one word out there, adjacency. If we can accomplish that, if there's a compromise there, and to me it's very clear in the Marshall decision that it referred in the Mi'kmaq territories. And I point out again that Mr. Sack has traveled over 2 bands, and we would not be having this discussion right now if Mr. Sack would honor that word adjacency. I have letters here in my files saying the 2 territories, Acadia and Bear River, never been consulted on this moderate livelihood by Mr. Sack. And it's unfortunate, and we do not have to put communities like Sauniaville and Matagan through this. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Madam Gill. Your time is up. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hutchins, we've talked a lot about, enforcing conservation efforts and trying to let cooler heads prevail on the ground and ensuring the safety of not only the public, but also of DFO officials and RCMP on the ground. And we heard that in 1999 that DFO wasn't prepared for protecting the safety of fishers on the water. I think all of us want to see DFO officials and officers be able to do their job safely and with pride. Can you talk about what it's like for enforcement officers today on the ground and what sort of resources are needed to support officers in doing their jobs effectively?
Well, certainly, in order to do the job effectively, we need more manpower. When it comes to resources, we need more capital to put into officers. When it comes to training, I think we're pretty well trained. However, if we don't have the resources, the boots on the ground, as it were, in order to monitor and make sure that compliance exists within a fishery, then what we're doing is we're doing a disservice to the people that are involved in that fishery, whether they be indigenous or commercial fishermen. And we have seen that over the years in all aspects of the fishery, that at times we have no resources for anything. And sometimes we've even been told to park our vehicles because we can't put gas in them.
Yeah, you cited that in your testimony, and that was pretty alarming to hear. You talked about training just now. Is there much training that you received around anti-racism or treaty rights, or ways to cross-cultural understanding? Was there much training from DFO?
No, we do have cross-cultural training now, and I believe they have a different term for it. But no, there's not enough of that. There's not a great understanding for the average fishery officer when it comes to Indigenous rights and the treaty rights and the rich culture that the Indigenous people bring to this country. And I can assure you that nobody that I know of have ever complained about supporting treaty rights. We all support them. We just want to know how to manage them.
Do you see that like as an inherent bias from the department, that's systemic racism by not providing those training? Because it's resources, really.
It is, but it's not just that. It's not just that fishery. It's the commercial fishery. It's the inland fishery. It's the fishery that where little kids can go out and fish with their fathers, and those are all problems. And without resources, you cannot effectively do your job. So you become ineffective. And because of that, we have seen such an expansion of illegal activity in the Saulnieville, the Matag, and the Digby area when it comes to this food, social, and ceremonial fishery. And we have spent years getting the commercial fishery under control. And here's my belief, enforcement starts with education. And my goal was always to educate people before I took enforcement action. Then if they failed to do that, then you take enforcement action. And so because of that, we need to have better dialogue with everybody involved, Indigenous sides, commercial sides. In order to do that, we have to come to the table. And it's like Mr. Beliveau said, and Mrs. Sonnenberg, we need a committee. We need
education's a key component.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Mr. Jans. Thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Hutchins. We're going way over. We'll now go to Mr. Williamson for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Beliveau, could you just unmute yourself? I got just a couple of quick little questions for you.
Yes.
All right.
Good.
I'm led to believe that you're a lobsterman. Is that right?
I was a lobsterman for 38 years.
Right. Well, once a lobsterman, always a lobsterman. You're also a former fisheries minister in the province of Nova Scotia. Is that right?
Yeah. For full disclosure, I was a municipal warden for 9 years at the municipal level. I spent 11 years at the House of Assembly as an MLA. And I can tell you right now, I have no affiliation with any political party. Yeah. And I am in retirement mode.
No, fair enough. No, and you're also a former NDP politician. So I always say politicians, I always say fishermen are a bit like politicians. You have to watch and hang on their every word. So I don't know what to make of you. So I'm going to keep you on a tight leash here because I suspect you got the gift of gab and then some. Are you concerned? Have you noticed, taking all your experience, that the debate that we've seen play out in Parliament, in the popular press, has become unmoored from the Marshall decisions? That the court decision that came down 21 years ago does not look very much like what we're seeing proposed today by some of the First Nation community, some of their advocates in the media, and even many of the voices coming out of Parliament. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree with part of it, Mr. Williamson. I think you're getting right to it here, is that what frustrates me the most is that this here is a discussion or disagreement over a court decision. And if you go back to 1999, to me, they talked about adjacency and issues like that. And to me, it's clear. And if you just where we're at now in the last 3 months between the media and both sides of this dispute, there's been very little focus on the actual Marshall decision. Yeah. And to me, I keep bringing this word up about adjacency. Yeah. And if we had this mechanism or this table, we could get this thing resolved.
That's my next question. I think you need to explain that the adjacency is important because the Marshall decisions, which came from the Supreme Court, indicate that right exists if the band was nearby, and it had to be nearby. Could you talk about that a little more? Because I think that's a very important point that's being missed. Why does it matter this jumping over bands? Why is that important?
Well, it matters if you. I hope that your members have a map there. If you don't, I hope you take notes. But if you look at the Shuby Band, Mr. Sachs Band is basically northeast of Halifax and between Halifax and Millbrook. And if you look at Bear River and Acadia, and in my opening remarks, I wanted to point out in an earlier question that Mr. Sachs is 2.5 to 3 hours car drive from his territory. It's roughly 1 day or 2 days in a fishing boat away from his territory. Now, if we go back to the Marshall decision and the clarification by your Fisheries Standing Committee, and I have documents clearly defining that it has to be adjacent to the individual chief's territory. And we would have this resolved within this hour frame we're doing right now.
And because of that means this fishery that we saw, this First Nation fishery that came from such a far away way, it doesn't fall within the Marshall decision. Is that your belief?
That's my interpretation. That's my perspective of the decision. Yes, and I think I'm not out to that far off of all the other commercial or the stakeholders in this area.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'd like to turn now, I've only got 30 seconds left, to Mr. Hutchings. Could you talk to me? We've heard from the minister that her office does not direct DFO officers. I think you've said something different in the press. Is the minister correct that there is no interference from the minister's office about enforcement on the waters?
That's absolutely incorrect. She had officers stand down from conducting a lawful enforcement of an illegal fishery. That is direct interference into what a fishery officer does. She has no authority to do that, by the way. She cannot, and I've talked to some learned people. She has no authority to interfere in an enforcement operation by telling them to stand down. I can tell you that fishery officers are embarrassed, they're deflated, they're disillusioned, and they have no faith in their department anymore because of this. And that's a serious situation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to switch my time with my colleague, Mr. Batiste.
Mr. Batiste, you're up. 5 minutes or less, please.
Yes, I just want to make a point in that the Marshall decision was about a treaty of 1760 that had no band councils at that time. Band councils didn't exist until 1960. But I want to ask about this whole adjacency argument. If adjacency was the argument in court, is what the court went with, then why did Donald Marshall Jr., a member of the Member 2 band, which is a 2-hour car drive away Pompket Harbor where he's harvesting eels, if adjacency was the law, why was Donald Marshall Jr. found innocent, not guilty of fishing out of season because of the Treaty of 1761? Mr. Beliveau, I'm listening to your legal argument on adjacency.
You're muted, Mr. Beliveau.
Can you hear me now, sir? You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go with adjacency. To me, this is and I've had access to lawyers and counsel over the 21 years here, adjacency, and it clearly defines that. And I can't get back into the mindset of the Supreme Court judges back on Donald Marshall, but I can get in the mindset of the Supreme Court. When they talked about adjacency, it's very clear. It spells it out, and I've had lawyers give me that same interpretation. And this is we're getting to the crux of the matter here. And if we can define that and come to an agreement that that's the interpretation, I can assure you that the interpretation of adjacency is in the minds of the commercial and the stakeholders in Nova Scotia.
But we've heard testimony that the Mi'kmaq Nation, which I'm a part of, traditionally has 7 districts. And Donald Marshall Jr. wasn't fishing within his district. So how is he not guilty? I keep kind of coming back to that. If that's the law, how is he not guilty?
Yeah, I'm not talking about Donald Marshall. I'm talking about a Supreme Court decision that talks about
Donald Marshall Jr. was a part of
the right for the Mi'kmaq to have access to a fishery, and it's very clear in that statement. It talks about the territories of the bands. We have 13 in Nova Scotia. And if we respect that decision, 13 bands with adjacency, we would have this solved by 90% tonight, sir.
But the bands didn't exist when the treaties were signed. They were a construct of the government in 1960. So I'm asking you about an agreement in 1760 between districts.
I'm telling you
about a federal construct. I'm wondering how you reconcile those.
I can reconcile by what I say, that the wording is very clear, is adjacency. And if you live by your the decision of the Supreme Court of 1999, it talks about it very clearly. And it's also in the clarification of the standing committee, the same committee that you're sitting on now. 21 years ago, give clarification to Marshall 2, and it went through the standing committee, the same committee that you're on, sir. 21 years ago, did a clarification, and it talked about the importance of adjacency. It can't get no clearer than that. And these are our elected officials that dealt with that word. And here we are 21 years into the future, and we're having the same discussion. And what I'm suggesting to you is that hopefully your standing committee can make a recommendation to the Minister of Fisheries to create this mechanism, and we have an opportunity to be heard and have this good discussion of level-headed people, and we can get this thing solved almost within hours. And I can go into I was hoping I get a question from you about the offshore, and that would be an interesting scenario. Now, I just want to plant this seed in your head, and I hope you'll have a chance to understand it. But if we were to remove the partnership where the Mi'kmaq is going to buy into Clearwater and remove the BC firm with the Atlantic Canadian inshore fishermen, just visualize that and partner with the Mi'kmaq, we would have a stepping stone of getting this thing resolved within hours. So I just want to leave you with that impression, and I hope you have a chance to reflect on that possible scenario, because this can be easily done. Put that sale on hold and just visualize a partnership. The word in itself will have a lot of solving nature to getting this issue solved. I hope you have time to reflect on that.
I'll make time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Batiste. We now go to Mr. D'Entremont for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to all our presenters today. Welcome. I want to go to Professor Dadswell for just a quick second. You know, in your opening remarks, you sort of said that the government of Canada will likely cause large-scale damage to lobster stocks in the Maritimes and cause a decline in lobster landings in this region. Some of the current concerns we are hearing are that catch rates during the summer are substantially higher in the fall. In your opinion, what would catch rates be for summer fishing versus seasonal fishing, and how important, as I think you said already, is St. Mary's Bay to lobster production for Southwest Nova, the Bay of Fundy, and the Gulf of Maine?
Summer fishing. Okay, start right at the beginning. The biology of the lobsters is that they are cold-blooded organisms, poikilotheriums, and that they feed and grow and so forth based on the temperature that they're living in. So if the water's warmer, they move around more, they eat more, and so forth. So the fishery in southwest Nova Scotia is really run in the winter when the lobsters slow down, right? Because it's colder. Temperatures are between 5 and 10 degrees centigrade instead of 15 to 20. So when you open up out of season in St. Mary's Bay, you're dealing with much warmer temperatures, so you're going to get a much higher catch rate because of it.
Well, what would that catch rate be? Would it be like 2 times higher, 10 times higher? What would that number be?
Well, basically, the temperature doubles or activity doubles for every 10 degrees in centigrade. So if the temperature in, say, December is 5, and in St. Mary's Bay in the fall it's 15 or higher, then you get a doubling of movement and a doubling of catch. And particularly in a situation where you put a few lobster traps in with bait, that's going to draw lobsters from all around rather than a lot of traps in with a few lobsters in each one.
All right. So that rolls me into Mr. Hutchings. When we talk about the FSC fishery that's been going on in St. Mary's Bay for a very long time, and I would say the illegal fishery that goes in and around the FSC fishery or the taking advantage of the FSC fishery, how many traps do you think are actually in the bay at this point? We've heard numbers as high as 4,000. What would your opinion be of how big that fishery actually is?
Well, I can only base it on my experience and the knowledge that I have. I know this year, because I'm in touch with fishermen all the time, there was in excess of 3,000 traps removed from the bay that were supposedly involved in an FSC fishery. Now we're supposed to have the understanding that there were 250 traps set for this moderate livelihood fishery to start. That was initially what we've been told. Now I want to give you a little bit of clarity here. From October, well, when this started, from September 17th to I think October the 3rd, when they started hauling their traps, Mr. Sack himself said that they caught $1.2 million worth of lobsters. So if we extrapolate that backwards and we look at the price they were getting for poor quality lobsters, that's roughly 300,000 pounds of lobsters in that short period of time. It takes a commercial fisherman 3 to 4 years to catch 300,000 pounds of lobsters, depending on the size of the vessel and how far they would have to travel to set their gear. So that gives you an idea of how many lobsters are in that bay in that summer and how vulnerable they are. And most of them, I would say 50% of them die when they're taken out of the water. That's why we found thousands of pounds in the woods that were discarded because they weren't marketable.
Well, I think that's why people are frustrated because they see that going on. I hear from the community that the Indigenous group was taking out summers close to 60,000 pounds of lobster per evening or per day. Would that be a reasonable number? Would that be a realistic number?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how much a day, but I know there's in excess of a million plus pounds a year coming out of there. And I was in the middle of doing some investigations on exactly how much lobster was coming out. I had put a proposal through to our regional office that I wanted to go down and I wanted to check every vessel that came in, and we wanted to weigh the lobsters because I wanted to deal with the quota situation that each band had allocated, and I wanted to shut the fishery down when that was achieved. However, my department would not let me do that. So I cannot tell you exactly what was taking place as far as the removal of lobsters, but I can tell you that on many occasions, we've seen one little boat bring in as high as 12, 15 crates of lobsters, in a 15-hour period. That's astronomical. Fishermen, if they could do that, they'd be catching 1 million pounds of lobsters each a year themselves.
So this is a lot more than the 500 traps. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Dantramat. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's been most interesting testimony given during this committee, during this important study. But one thing is clear, Minister Bernadette Jordan did not create the problem that we're dealing with today. This situation has evolved from a department that was ill-equipped to deal with a court decision, and the evidence shows that. And at the same time, a department that faced years and years of cutback in the key enforcement area, which Mr. Hutchings speaking to. If we're going to move forward in this area, then we have to develop a regulatory regime that is going to regulate effectively both the indigenous fishery, which will take place because the Supreme Court of Canada rule that the First Nation community have a right to access to a fishery. It is the same court and legal system that protects the value of the commercial fishing industry in Atlantic Canada. The same court system. If we did not have the ability to enforce the commercial fishery through the courts, then those licenses would not be worth what they are, and the industry would not be worth what it is to the coastal communities and the commercial industry. So there's enough blame to go around, but it did not all occur within the last few weeks. And so I just wanted to make that comment regarding my colleague, Minister Bernadette Jordan, who is attempting to deal with a situation that simmered for 20 years, and because it was unresolved, it wasn't dealt with. So my question goes to Melanie Sonnenberg, who is the one person representing the lobster fishery, and it's important when we get witnesses saying, using comparisons to other areas, when you use a comparison to Maine as a justification that you can fish when you want to, because if we allow this industry to be destroyed, as the chair can speak to in this committee, you have a situation like the cod fishery in Newfoundland where nobody has anything. The only way that the First Nation are going to have a moderate livelihood is if this resource continues to be managed as it has over the past 20 years, which successfully managed this industry into a very lucrative industry. So I would ask Melanie if she would speak to the difference between Maine. Mr. Doswell referred to it as a bit, but you cannot apply the Maine fishery to maritime Canada on the same equations because there's much different scenarios. So could you speak to that, Melanie?
Well, I can certainly try. And given that I live in an area that is neighboring the Maine fishery, I certainly can give a little insight. We have a different, we heard from Professor Dadswell about what some of those differences are. We have a very robust management system that you've referenced. It plays out in terms of the landed value of the product that we're bringing in. And the seasons are set up for reasons. And the industry themselves in the, for the harvesters that I would represent, take the rules that we have very seriously. And generally, I would say are very supportive. Certainly, there's always bad apples in every lot. But for the most part, people believe in them. And that's what got us to where we are. And when you look at the economic value of the lobster fishery and the increase that it has seen in the last number of years, through the reproductive cycles that we've seen, it's been extraordinary, and we've all benefited from it, from the access that came from Marshall, from the non-native harvesters. Everybody has seen better days out of that, and I think that we need to take a good long look before we start making any changes to be like the Maine fishery, who fish a soft product, and it comes with problems. So for us, I don't hear anybody saying, let's switch over to the Maine program. And I'm working with a lot of groups that fish lobster, and that just doesn't seem to be on the menu on any particular day, Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you. Chair, what's my time?
30 seconds.
Oh, thank you, Melanie, because it's important to have that on the record, because some people from an academic side will make comparisons when, quite frankly, they don't know what in the hell they're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. We'll now go to Madame Gill for 2.5 minutes, please.
With respect to the mechanisms that we have been spoken about, can you lower your microphone, please? It's impossible to hear. Thank you. My time, is it going to be shortened because of this? Ms. Sonnenberg, Mr. Hutchins, and Mr. Beliveau, we've talked about a mechanism earlier. But if we get that, what would be the first subjects that you would like to see discussed? The most urgent management, the territories, is the centralization of DFO. Just explain to me what that would be important for you.
I think in the short term, Madam Gill, the best approach would probably be to pick a couple of items that are key to the industries on both sides. And I suspect that some of that we'd have to have some objectives that collectively all parties could agree to. And one of those certainly is, how we come together respectfully. I think that's the first and most important thing that we do, and that we have rules of engagement. So that will not come in a day, but that's something that we should look at. And then maybe look at our successes that we've had in the last 21 years. And there are lots of them to look at as examples, and go from there to build out some kind of a plan forward.
Would Mr. Hutchins or Mr. Beliveau like to add to this response?
Gary, I would just like to say that Melanie is on the right track. We can download 10 or 12 items or agenda topics that we'd like to have solved, but we have to deal with, first and foremost, the way in which the fishery is managed, the resource to do that, coming together to talk with a transparency and a dialogue, and it has to come from the fishers, and it has to come from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And there hasn't been a lot of transparency from Fisheries and Oceans. I will tell you that. I have that experience. And so I think that the first thing we can do is we can seriously look at getting all the necessary people together to discuss these things at a rational level. And we must keep in mind the spirit and the intent of the Marshall decision. And as we move forward, we need to honor what is written, but we also must make sure that the commercial industry has a say in how things unfold as well, since they are so largely invested. And so far, we've seen it a little bit one-sided by the minister.
Thank you, Madam Gill. I did allow for a little bit of extra time for you. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to the witnesses for your testimony today. I am concerned that I've heard a lot of, unproven allegations and speculation today in this round at this committee, and I think it's really important that we talk about facts. And I know this committee, we've heard competing testimony also on the matter of data collection and protocols and science assessments. Ms. Sonnenberg, do you think that DFO has a data collection problem? And if so, do you think DFO should do, what should DFO do to improve its data collection? We've heard lots of different testimony here on this panel around enforcement, around allegations that are unproven against a certain segment of fishers. And now we've heard data that's different. Can you tell me what you'd like to see in terms of moving forward when we're looking at, studying issues like what we're studying today?
DFO has a system in place for commercial harvesters that involves the submission of logbooks and record of catches, which ties into some of the provincial license, not some, all of the provincial licenses that are issued in terms of the quantity of lobsters that's coming ashore. It's been a program in place in the Maritime DFO region, I would say probably for 15 years. And in the Gulf side, it's been in play for quite a while as well. Sometimes the information is slow to be processed. We find that on our side, but I think it's been an opportunity for us to have better data, and it's evolved. It's not perfect, Mr. Johns, but we're trying to. We work with harvesters to make it better, make it more efficient, and make it accurate on the industry side. And DFO is working at it as well. There's imperfections, but it's come a long way, and I think that it's been an important feature in our fishery, but I don't think we need any more of it. I think what we need to do is use what we have wisely.
Mr. Hutchins, you shared, your story about the dumping of lobster, and you made some pretty strong allegations in speculation, I would say. Can you explain why you shared that story with us, since nobody was charged?
Well, I shared that story because it has a level of importance. It talks about the disregard of thousands of pounds of lobsters that had a major value to the resource and to industry.
There was no one proven who did that. So why would you speculate?
Well, because it just goes to show you that the fishery in St. Mary's Bay is unregulated, and our hands as DFO officers were tied because we were not allowed to do the necessary checks. We did a last-minute investigation. We did not have the time or the resources to complete the investigation to prove whether it was indigenous fishers that dumped the lobsters or if it was the fish buyers that were buying the lobsters. We know it was either one because we did get that far. But the problem is, if you can't have the resources and the time to do these investigations, because I can tell you in the Digby detachment, we were overwhelmed. We have a huge amount of fisheries there.
Yeah, imagine some non-indigenous fishers committed.
Thank you, Mr. Jans. Thank you, Mr. Jans. Thank you, Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you.
Mr. Jans, you've gone way over. We'll now go to Mr. Bragdon for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to the guests who are here this evening. We really appreciate your time and valuable insights and perspectives. I want to state this right off the bat. It is tomorrow, I understand, in District 34. The season starts at 9 a.m. in the morning, I believe, and we want to just take this opportunity to make sure that the fishers and the fish harvesters of District 34 have a very safe and hopefully very productive season on the waters, and hopefully things go really well. And I know that's always a big day in these regions when it's starting day. So we wish them well. And I want to just put to each of you, and I know we're coming down here to the conclusion of this particular committee, and we're in the last round, and I want to give you an opportunity to speak to us about in the pathway forward. And I know some of you have all made some points on this so far in the testimony we've heard, but going forward, if you could summarize your thoughts as to what you feel are the areas that need the most focus and the most attention right away to get to a peaceful resolution of this situation and make sure we have the fishery on a solid footing. And we've heard a variety of testimony, but coming from your perspective and through your lens, what would be your top ranked priorities for this committee to hear? I think that would be the way I'd like to wrap up my time of questioning with you. So we'll start with you, Mrs. Sonnenberg, and then go through the other guests. Thank you.
All right. Well, in the interest of time, I'll say it very quickly again. Yeah. We need to have a table to go to. We definitely need better communication for all parties, and we need transparency for all parties. I think those are my three key things that I would put out to the committee. That's where we have to start. There's lots of work to do, but the transparency and the communication are key to a better relationship for all involved.
Thank you. Mr. Beliveau?
Am I good to go? My mic on?
Yep.
Okay. No, what I see is we need that panel or a mechanism. We need to put the Clearwater on sale on hold. And to me, I like to have the opportunity to talk about that offshore decision in The Hague was established by witnesses and testimonies from Southwest Nova. And that there was a mechanism in place to get their testimonies, and that decision was won by our historical attachment to the offshore. 200 miles was established, and now the Mi'kmaq has an opportunity to have that. I'm not denying that, but I really believe that we should have an opportunity to be in partnership with that particular deal. And we're dealing with this, sir, under a pandemic across our nation. So with all that in consideration, we should surely have a recommendation from the Fisheries Standing Committee just to put the brakes on this and just the word adjacency and establish a mechanism. I would think you would give every commercial fisherman and the Mi'kmaq an early Christmas present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beliveau. And now Mr. Doswell and then Mr. Hutchins. Quickly, I don't know how much time I've got here, so.
Well, what I'd like to add to this is that it seems to me that there should be more involvement from the lobster biologists and DFO, that they should come out and say what they know about the biological conservation of stocks, such as didn't happen in Newfoundland and didn't happen in some other situations, and how quickly a fishery can collapse when people do not pay attention to the recruitment process that goes on. As long as there's good recruitment, then high exploitation can usually be handled. But as soon as something happens to the recruitment because of the environment or because of bad fishing practices, stocks can collapse very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Dollar. Mr. Hutchins?
Yes, it's paramount that we have a level of enforcement that allows officers to make sure that they get out and collect the information. You're talking about, the need for numbers and statistics. If we don't know what's coming out of the water and we don't know where it's going, we have inherent problems already. So if we have those resources put in place, I think we would be farther ahead. The other thing I think is that I hope there's no rush to judgment and that the minister doesn't decide to create a fishery without hearing all the information, because I think we have to understand that although there is a perceived right here, but I will tell you again, there is not when it comes to lobsters, the one species. The Crown may limit or infringe the right to a moderate livelihood, but there must be an overriding purpose, of course, for limiting the exercise of that right, such as conservation or public safety or other interests. We need to clearly think about those terms as we move forward. The last thing I want to see is that there's another conflict between the commercial fishermen and the indigenous fishers. Here a couple of years ago, we had an incident in Cape Breton where some fishermen caught a man poaching, hauling his lobsters, and they shot him, and he's at the bottom of the ocean. Now, I can tell you that tensions will run high if the wrong decisions are made, and somebody will die. And I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't want that blood on my hands. That's a very serious thing.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to go back to Melanie to just elaborate a bit more on Mr. Bragdon's question, which was quite good. Because you represent the industry, what would be your advice to this committee on because there was a reference, we need to find common ground in those areas where you feel there is common ground between the commercial industry and the First Nation community?
Judging from some experiences that I've had in my time in the fishery, our common ground is that the people who have access to the fishery want to earn a living. And those that are exercising, that either privilege or right, the common ground is to bring home a lobster so that you can make a livelihood, whether you be Indigenous or non-Indigenous. I think that's one of the things. When we get to the wharf, the operational side of it, Mr. Morrissey, is very clear that everybody's working off the same kind of platforms, and there's a lot of commonalities that can be, looked at, and people generally bond over those things. So I think some of those things are really important. We tend to spend a lot of time looking at the negatives about what we've heard in the press, but really when we go into communities and we go to the wharves, I think there's a lot to be seen and heard and learned from the people who are living this every day. So, that might not be a strong answer, but it's the best answer I have tonight.
Thank you. New question to Mr. Hutchings. Mr. Hutchings, you were in the enforcement regulatory field for some time. What do you see as the challenges that would come into play in enforcing a livelihood fishery?
Well, that is very simple. It would be another fishery, and if it's at another time of a year, then other than the commercial.
Well, no, it's not necessarily. Maybe at another time of the year.
Well, we don't know. Well, then we have a greater access. We have a larger number of people participating in a fishery. That takes more time, more effort, more equipment. Simply, it takes more dollars. Unless we have a plan in place to move forward that we can enforce all fisheries equally and fairly and justly, then I think we're putting the cart before the horse, sir.
So you would agree then that the key decision has to be made is to ensure that there is a regulatory regime in place that fairly protects the fishery and has clear parameters for those that are participating in it. That should be the fundamental premise that we would look at to go forward. Am I interpreting you right?
Yes, absolutely. We cannot proceed without that because as I testified in my experience in the FSC fishery, we've never been able to enforce that properly. And that's a disservice to the Indigenous people and the people of Nova Scotia.
Just you raised a point there, and because it's been touched on in the periphery, you've been in the enforcement, so it's important for me to ask you this question. Is there lobster that's caught under food and ceremonial that's making its way into commercial sales?
90% of it. And we know through years of investigation that, and there are a number of buyers in Southwest Nova that are buying lobster, and they haven't hid it from any of their community members. They are buying it and selling it, and we've been trying to track it for years. I've been involved in several cases. In the last one, that we just charges were laid and a conviction was upheld, and that was because they were buying Indigenous lobsters and selling them.
And you say a charge was laid and the conviction was upheld. Who was the charge against, the buyer or the seller?
It was against the buyer.
Against
yes.
the buyer.
Yes.
Good. Mr. Chair, what's my time?
40 seconds from now.
I want to thank the witnesses and to Mr. Beliveau, an intriguing observation you made on the sale of Clearwater. Really intriguing and most interesting to have a partnership, the opportunity to have a partnership between the commercial industry and our First Nations community here on the East Coast. Yeah, great concept. Thank you.
Well, I hope I have a few seconds to respond to that. But to me, I just hope that you have the opportunity and your committee members to reflect on that word, partnership. And to me, I can go into great detail about how that fishery was established. It was from the commercial. I can show you from the commercial sector. I'd like to have some time to expand on that. But that was brought about by our historical attachment, the commercial sector. And to me, we are not even had the opportunity to be involved in that possible sale. And if just the word of a partnership in that sale with Clearwater, with the Mi'kmaq, would go a long way and get a lot of people thinking right across Canada of, yeah, we're on the path of resolving this. And if I can just conclude with my remarks here, is that the common ground the earlier witness talked about, we have people in PEI in District 33 that are fishing commercial licenses as we speak in the same seasons. And after this is all settled, the dust is all settled, both sides, Mi'kmaq and commercial sector, has to live in the same community. And this was the overall impact that I had back 21 years ago. That was the agreement that everybody agreed upon, is that, yes, we have agreement, but we have to live in the same community and we want to live in peace and harmony.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morrissey. I want to again reiterate with all my colleagues a big thank you to Mr. Hutchins, Mr. Dadswell, and Ms. Sonnenberg for coming back this evening, and Mr. Beliveau for being here as well. It's been a very interesting committee. I'll allow the witnesses to leave now before we close off the meeting completely.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald, and thank you all the committee members. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I loved your accent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee members, and I wish you all a very early Christmas, and take care of yourself and be healthy. Thank you.
Same to yourself. Thank you.
Chair, have we got the technical issues? Do we go into another meeting or not?
Well, actually, there are technical issues, but the other issue is that we only have about 30 minutes left. By the time we sign off from this one and come on to another one, I don't think it does justice to our analysts to be able to hear what the committee members want to instruct with regards to drafting instructions. So I think it would be better for us to reschedule that possibly at the end of the next meeting, if we can do it at all. Do one set of witnesses for the salmon and then go into drafting instructions. It might be a better choice. There were technical issues. It may be straightened out now, but I'm afraid to go in even for 30 minutes and that fail and we lose everything we're doing. I just want to say, on one of the statements earlier, is everybody's time is their time. What you do with that time is up to you. I try to be as generous as I can at times to allow witnesses to actually finish an answer. But when it comes to getting unmuted or being heard, that's on your time. So everybody has to be aware of what they're doing at the time when it rolls around to their particular questioning slot. That way there'll be no time lost in it. I did allow some free leeway on that this evening, but it takes away from sometimes being able to get to all the questioners. So, and then we have another member probably upset with the chair for allowing others to go over and they not get a chance to speak their questions. So I try to be as fair as I can, and I'll continue that. But I would ask everyone to be aware of when their time is up and when their time is about to start. And basically, that's it. I thank everybody for their cooperation again this evening. Thank you to Nancy and the analysts and all the staff and the interpreters for putting up with us again this evening. I know we're later than usual, but votes was the biggest cause of that. So again, we'll see everybody Monday evening.
Ken, I'm on a couple of committee meetings, and you're more than fair.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I don't want anybody mad.
Have a good one, guys.
You too. Good night, everyone.
Good night.